Welcome to another edition of the Classic Traction Review, and in this volume we will see some of the finest steam and diesel action as captured by the Classic Traction film crews on preserved lines as well as the national network from the early summer, autumn and winter of 2023. Some of the many highlights coming up will include mainline action at Winwick Junction, a review of the Lakeshore Railroad on Tyneside, highlights from the Steam Gala at the Perrigrove Railway in the Forest of Dean, and Flying Scotsman's visit to the West Country. We will also see all the action from the Severn Valley Diesel Gala in May, see diesel and steam rail tours throughout the West Country, as well as Class 40 D345's visit to Weymouth, and much, much more. We begin our review for the latter half of 2023 at Winwick Junction, just north of Warrington. And heading south on the 22nd of April, we see 57601 and 47802 in top and tail formation as they head south, with the return Appleby to Telford Central charter. And in fading light, 7029 Clun Castle passes Winwick, heading south with the return Appleby to Birmingham New Street, Cumbrian Mountain Express. And this was the first occasion that Clun Castle had hauled a rail tour over the Settle and Carlisle route since 1967. We now head to the Lakeshore Railroad in South Shields, and being prepared on shed, we see one of the three steam locomotives based on the line, American Outline Santa Fe 462 Pacific 3440 Mountaineer. Opened in 1972, the Lakeshore Railroad is the only 9.5-inch gauge miniature steam railway in the United Kingdom. And at Marine Station we see the line's two principal steam locomotives, number 27, a 262 tender prairie called Adalia, beside Santa Fe Pacific, Mountaineer. The railway runs for approximately a third of a mile around the boating lake in South Marine Park, and we see number 27 as she skirts the lake and approaches Marine Station. The other principal steam locomotive at Lakeshore is a 462 Pacific 3440 Mountaineer, which we see hauling a couple of tippler wagons during steam tests. Mountaineer is a 1/6 scale miniature of a Class 3400 462 Pacific that was constructed by the Baldwin Locomotive Works for the Santa Fe Railroad between 1919 and 1924. A class of 50 locomotives, these were the very last Pacifics that were built for the Santa Fe Railroad and were designed for high-speed passenger duties like the Chief, but in its later years the class, like so many steam engines, were relegated to freight duties. Number 27 was originally built in 1939, and when the locomotive arrived at South Shields in October 1975, it was essentially just a collection of parts, containing a very worn-out chassis with no boiler, no tender or plate work. The locomotive that we see today therefore bears very little resemblance to the locomotive that was built over 80 years ago, having been substantially rebuilt and modernised for its duties at Lakeshore. We now head to the Peregrove Railway, in the heart of the Forest of Dean, on the occasion of their steam gala, and we see resident 060 tank, Spirit of Adventure, as she climbs the gradient to Oak Iron. The Peregrove Railway uses a 15-inch gauge and describes itself as a minimum narrow gauge railway, and has been inspired by the estate railways developed by Sir Arthur Hayward. And we see Spirit of Adventure climbing to Oak Iron with a mixed goods working. The gala was also attended by several visitors, and visiting from the Easham Vale Light Railway was 442 Atlantic Count Louis, which was built in 1924 by Bassett Loke, and was later based on the Fairborn Railway from 1925 until 1987. Struggling up the line's steep gradients and on wet rails, we see Anne as she heads to Oak Iron. An 062 tank, Anne was built by the Exmoor Steam Railway and was originally based on the Longleat Railway before arriving at Peregrove in February 2015. The Peregrove Railway runs for almost 1.5 miles, and currently the most powerful locomotive based on the line is Lydia, a 262 Prairie tank built by Alan Keefe. And even in the most challenging conditions, this powerful tank engine seems to make light work of the line's 1 in 29 gradient. The smallest locomotive based on the line is this privately owned replica of an American Baldwin 040, number 27 Sunni, which we see making great progress as she storms up the bank, heading to Oak Iron. However, a little later, and a combination of wet rails and a challenging 1 in 29 gradient was almost proving too much for our little Baldwin, and it was almost a case of get out and push. Another visitor at the gala was Sean, a 242 that is today based at the Kirklees Light Railway. Built in 1951 to a design by Ernest W. Twining, and along with her larger sister Katie, worked at the Fairborne Railway from 1964 until the mid-1980s. We conclude this section with narrow gauge superpower and with a pair of Fairborne residents reunited once again as Count Louis leads Sean as they storm up the bank and head to Oak Iron. We now head to Keyham in the suburbs of Plymouth and see the current modern traction scene as GWR Class 800 IETs, 800 003 and 800 024 pass Keyham with the 1618 Penzance to Paddington working. And this was quickly followed by Class 802 IET 802 004 heading a local working from Penzance to Plymouth. However, what most people were waiting for was the arrival of the legendary LNER A3 Pacific 6103 Flying Scotsman, which was returning from Cornwall with the return par to Bristol Temple Meads Royal Duchy Rail Tour. In May, the Severn Valleys celebrated the 50th anniversary of diesel preservation through one of their ever-popular diesel galas. And at Arley, we see a pair of visiting Class 20s, 2189 and 20048 as they leave for Bridgnorth. The event hosted two Class 31s, 31270 Athena and 31466, and we see 31 wearing the attractive Regional Railways livery that was carried by 5 members of the class in their later years. The other Class 31 was 31466, the only member of the class to ever wear EWS livery, which she carried in service from May 1998. And we see 31466 as she enters Bewdley with the 1730 from Kidderminster Town to Bridgnorth. The Class 31s are powered by the proven English Electric 12-cylinder CSVT engine, rated at 1470 horsepower, that was later used in the more powerful Class 37s. And climbing away from Arley, 31466 passes Bank Farm as she heads for Bridgnorth. 'Visiting from the Telford Steam Railway was Class 37 37263, and wearing the BR General or Departmental Grey livery from the early 1990s, we see 37263 leaving Foley Park Tunnel as she heads for Bridgnorth. 37263's visit to the Severn Valley really gave her a chance to stretch her wheels, and treating her enthusiast to a bit of thrash, 37263 is opened up as she accelerates away from Bank Farm and heads towards Highley. At Arley, we see 37263 looking absolutely immaculate in departmental grey livery as she waits to pass GWR HST 43188 Newport Castle with 43186 Taunton Castle on the rear as they arrive with the 1400 Kidderminster Town to Arley shuttle. The Diesel Gala celebrated 50 years of diesel preservation, and what finer way to illustrate how far diesel preservation has progressed in the last half a century than seeing a GWR HST leave as 37263 gets underway simultaneously as she continues to Kidderminster. "37263 was built at English Electric's Vulcan Foundry in January 1965, being delivered new to Darnall Shed, and remained an Eastern Region machine until May 1985, when she was transferred north to Eastfield Depot in Glasgow, and crossing over the River Severn, she disturbs the tranquility at Victoria Bridge. In May 1988, 37263 became a Welsh machine when she was allocated to Cardiff Canton, and following an F exam at Lera in late 1989, she was repainted in the BR General Departmental Grey livery of the Civil Engineer, and we see 37263 as she gets underway from Bewdley. Also at the gala was one of the GWR's Castle HST sets. In what was probably to be their last summer in regular service, we see 43188 Newport Castle and 43186 Taunton Castle as they leave Foley Park Tunnel and head towards Bewdley before rounding Safari Curve at Sandy Lane. Returning from Arley, 43186 Taunton Castle leads 43188 Newport Castle as they cross the iconic Victoria Bridge with the return 1500 Arley to Kidderminster Town shuttle service. In addition to the castle set, The event also included 2 power cars from Rail Adventure, 43465 and 43484, and we see these power cars in back-to-back formation hauling the ScotRail set, with Mark IIF DBSO 9707 and 47712 Lady Diana Spencer on the rear as they leave Foley Park Tunnel. For many, the highlight of the gala was the ScotRail set, and approaching Bank Farm near Arley, we see 47712 Lady Diana Spencer with DBSO 9707 and visiting Class 60 60062 on the rear as they head the 11 o'clock bridge north to Kidderminster town. Built by Brush at their Falcon Works in Loughborough, 47712 was new as D1948 and entered traffic in August 1966, before being equipped with ETH in 1974 and renumbered as 47505. However, in 1979, she was one of a dozen Scottish Class 47s chosen to become part of a dedicated pool of locomotives fitted with push-pull equipment to operate ScotRail Express services. Emerging from Crewe Works in 1979 and allocated to Haymarket Depot in Edinburgh, 47712 was named Lady Diana Spencer in April 1981 and later received the iconic ScotRail livery in 1985. And we see 47712 as she enters Bewdley. The Severn Valley is currently home to no less than 6 Class 50s, and we see one of these, 50035 Ark Royal, leaving Highley with the 1730 bridge north to Kidderminster town. Built by English Electric in August 1968, 50035 was the first Class 50 to be named, receiving the name Ark Royal in January 1978, and is today preserved in her post-1978 pre-refurbished condition, and we see Ark Royal as she nears Arley and approaches Bank Farm. Also in action were two of the line's Class 52 Western diesel hydraulics, D1015 Western Champion and D1062 Western Courier, and we see Western Champion as she leaves Arley and crosses Victoria Bridge. The Class 52 Westerns were fitted with twin 65-litre Maybach V12 engines, which generated some 2,760 horsepower. And rounding Safari Curve, we hear Western Courier's Maybach V12s to glorious effect as she approaches Foley Park Tunnel. Also at the event was another 1970s veteran, Colas-owned Class 56, 56051 Survival, which is seen leaving Foley Park Tunnel as she heads the ScotRail set, with 47712 Lady Diana Spencer as they head a Kidderminster Town to Highley shuttle. The Class 56s were built between 1977 and 1984 and proved to be powerful and reliable performers during their BR careers. Powered by a 16-cylinder Ruston power plant that generates some 3,250 horsepower, we see 56051 as she passes Bank Farm after leaving Arley. Also visiting the event was Class 60 60062, which had recently been repainted into a unique steel-on-steel livery featuring a bold flame design. The livery is designed to symbolise the importance that DB Cargo and the Class 60s have played in transporting metal products around the UK. and we see 6062 with the ScotRail set as they head away from Arley. We conclude our review of the Gala with some modern traction, as DRS Class 88 88001 Revolution leads the ScotRail set across Victoria Bridge. The Class 88s are a dual-mode electro-diesel that use either a Caterpillar C27 4-stroke V12 diesel engine or take current from the 25 kV overhead, and are indeed a sharp contrast to the other classic types seen earlier at this event. We now head to the miniature Bickington Steam Railway at Trago Mills in South Devon for the occasion of their ever popular Steam Gala, which featured resident steam locomotives Alice and Sandy River replica number 24. Leaving the terminus at Trago Riverside is one of the most popular locomotives on the line, number 24 Sandy River, a replica of a Sandy River and Rangeley Lakes Railroad 262 narrow gauge locomotive from North America. Opened in 1988, this 10¼ inch gauge railway operates for almost 2 miles, running around effectively a balloon loop, and passing over the Trago Pond we see Sandy River as she heads back to Trago Riverside. Number 24 Sandy River is a third-size replica of a Sandy River and Rangeley Lakes Railroad 2-foot narrow gauge locomotive that once operated through Franklin County in Maine, North America, and we see her as she climbs through Trago Woods. Also in action was Trago's resident 260 mogul Alice, which was built by Simpkins and Veer in 1984. Now resplendent in maroon livery, Alice has been the mainstay of services on the line in recent years and crosses over the magnificent Trago Viaduct. We conclude our review of this often overlooked miniature railway in Trago Woods, as Alice heads around the circuit with the Tragonian as she passes Trago Central Junction. Next, we look at some of the mixture of steam and diesel rail tours that could be observed in the West Country this summer. And making a welcome return to Devon was Class 50 5008 Thunderer, double-heading with Class 67 67028 as they pass Shoulden Bridge near Teignmouth with a Huddersfield to Paignton charter. On the 29th of May, a pair of Class 33s made a welcome return to South Devon when 33025 and 33029 double-headed the Crompton Torbay Ventura Rail Tour, and we see the pair of Cromptons as they pass the site of the former gasworks sidings at Hollycombe as they descend towards Paignton. On the 3rd of June, it was the turn of the Northern Belle to visit Devon, and powered by 57313 Scarborough Castle and 47813 in Toppentail formation, the pair passed the classic location of Cockwood Harbour as they head the Truro to Swansea section of the tour. On the 10th of June, a Class 40 made a welcome return to the southern region when D345 headed a rail tour to Weymouth to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Pathfinder Tours. And in Toppentail formation with 47815 Great Western, D345 storms out of Bincombe Tunnel. Climbing out of Weymouth with the return working, we can hear the full effect of D345's 2,000 horsepower English electric power plant as she tackles the 1 in 50 gradient and passes the site of Upwey Wishingwell Halt before passing through Bincombe Tunnel. We now turn our attention to some of the many steam tours that have visited the West Country this summer. And on the 27th of May, LMS Jubilee 45596 Bahamas headed the South Devon Explorer Rail Tour to Plymouth, which we see leaving Teignmouth at Shoulden Bridge. With the Dartmoor foothills in the distance, 45596 Bahamas heads the return working back to Woking as she approaches Ivy Bridge and passes Dinnerton. On the 30th of July, it was the turn of Sister Jubilee 45699 Galatay to visit the West Country with the Royal Duchy Rail Tour from Slough. Running as long scrap sister 45627 Sierra Leone, we see the return working from Par as she climbs the formidable 1 in 42 gradient of Hemerdon Bank. Eastern Region Power was not forgotten, and on the 24th of August, LNER A4 Pacific 60007 Sir Nigel Gresley headed the Golden Hind Rail Tour to Plymouth, and we see the A4 on the last stage of the climb to Dainton Tunnel, banked by 47593 Galloway Princess, which was giving a useful banking assistance at the rear. Leaving Plymouth, 60,007 Sir Nigel Gresley makes a wonderful sight and sound as she passes the Royal Eye Infirmary, with the return Golden Hind working back to Slough, once again ably assisted by 47593 at the rear.
That was cool, wasn't it? Take it video.
We conclude our review for 2023 with one final view of the wonderful Blue Streak as Sir Nigel Gresley passes the classic location of Cockwood Harbour with the return Kingswear to Slough English Riviera Express.